As I begin this episode of the Mark Medley Show, if you will, the first thing I'm going to touch on is this whole trial is going on. And I literally refuse to watch the trial. And I'm doing that consciously, intentionally, and on purpose, that I am not watching this trial. Now, that does not mean that I am not following along kind of, sort of, with what's going on. And again, based on commentary that I'm seeing on news clips from local news, because if you go with one of the cable news networks or that's all you'll hear. But if you go on the local news, it's only like a little 10-second snippet. So from watching local news and following along on social media, that's how I'm keeping up with it. Now, let me first say this. I truly hope that we don't get so caught up in the fact that it was a white man and a black man that we don't see the fact that it was a man killing another man. I mean, I don't care if they were purple and green. I don't care if they were fuchsia and orange. I don't care what color they were. The fact of the matter is, you had one man murdering another man. And not only did he kill him, but he killed it on tape. Now, because see, this one is a little bit different. I mean, because all of these filmed or videoed cases are somewhat kind of similar. And we've had some really weird outcomes in cases where video has been involved, going back to at least Rodney King and probably before. But probably the most notable videoed case would be Rodney King and then everything that kind of happened after that. But we've had some real side-eyed, sideways results or verdicts with video footage that folks could see with their eyes and hear, and yet would still turn around and rule the exact opposite of what the video was showing, for whatever reason. Because I know in this country, all you got to do is prove a shadow of a doubt. You know, just put a little bit of doubt in there, and that's really all you need to get off. But in this particular instance, I can't imagine. Matter of fact, I would not want to be the defense attorney, because he or she, they don't have too much to work with. Now, they trying, but they don't have too much to work with based on the video, the witnesses, the audio, the various calls that was made to 911, the folks in the neighborhood who were saying, get off of him. So there's not a lot to go on. And yet there is still the possibility that that jury will swing in the opposite direction of what everything is telling them. Now, I posted on the other day, and believe me when I tell you, I've said this over and over again, and there is really no shame in my game. This is another one of those, you can agree or disagree. We just going to have to agree to disagree. Personally, and this is Mark Medley, personally, I honestly believe O.J. Simpson killed those folks. I really do. But I also see that O.J. had a brilliant attorney in Johnny Cochran. Johnny Cochran knew exactly what he needed to do to play it. So when he came up with that, if it don't fit, you must acquit, that was brilliant. Johnny did what he needed to do in terms of working the prosecution because he knew them. He knew how to play that. So the fact that he came up with that whole glove thing, that was sheer brilliance. I don't think the defense attorney in this particular case is that brilliant, but I don't know. So what I put on what I put on Twitter the other day was, I truly hope we don't have one of those, if it don't fit, you must acquit tricks that will get this guy off. Because it is very clear. I mean, he came, like I told you, I haven't watched it. However, I have been keeping up with little clips. And I remember one of the witnesses on the first day, he tried to hang him up on the fact that he called the officer a bum. He's standing there talking about, did you call him a bum? And, and did that move to effing bum? It's like, really, seriously, you're going to try? And thank God the brother said, look, you're not going to sit here and try to paint me, and I'm paraphrasing, you're not going to sit here and try to paint me as the angry black man. And I was so glad he said that. Because it wasn't about whether I call him a bum or not. They were trying to shift blame. Oh, well, so you got a man lying there dead and you got a defense attorney talking about something. Did you call the officer a bum? Really? Seriously? Come on. Oh, and did that get to effing bum? And then, so now the next couple of days, there's something about the officer was distracted. Because of the folks in the community that distracted him. Now, anyone that could look at that video or photograph of that face, there were no distraction there. That was nothing but straight up arrogance. Now, all of this is my opinion now. Be very clear. This is a part, that's the beauty of, being able to do podcasts and everything else. It's all my, I guess you do not have to agree. I'm all right with that. But that photo, to me, did not show distraction. That showed arrogance. That showed cockiness. That showed I'm the officer and you're not. That showed I'm in control and you're not. That showed I'm going to show you who the boss is. That's what that body language and those facial expressions showed. There was no being distracted by the community, because if you were that distracted, your knee would have got up off his neck. If you were that distracted, you would have gotten up, or you would have turned around, or you would have done something other than be able to sit there for 9+ minutes with your knee depressed on another human being's neck. So we don't want to hear that distraction thing. To me, that's a weak argument. How distracted could you have been? Your colleagues were also trying to get you to get off of his neck. Didn't listen to them. The community was trying to get the man off his neck. Wouldn't listen to them. Was being videoed the entire time. Did not matter. The paramedics came. None of that, because these are all the folks that, that's on the witness stand. You got paramedics, you got the fire department, you got folks that were coming out to help, that this man was almost in effect blocking them from helping. So how distracted could he have been? Now, for those of you that think 9 minutes is not a long time, I have a few experiments for you. Because I don't know if you're like me, but I have a microwave oven. And every now and again, matter of fact, not every now and again, just about every day, I have to heat something up in the microwave. And usually it's only for a minute or two. Maximum 4 minutes. Usually averaging around 2 to 3 minutes, that whatever I'm heating up, whether it's lunch, dinner, a cup of coffee or whatever, it takes no more than 2 to 3 minutes. Now, let me tell you where I'm going with this. If you don't think 9 minutes is a long time, put something in the microwave for about 3 minutes and stand there and wait for it to get done. Wait for it to go through the process, and then whatever sound the microwave may make to let you know that it's ready, stand there for that time. If you don't think 9 minutes is a long time, put something in the microwave for 3 or 4 and stand there and wait and see how long that takes. That's one way. You want to try that? Try it. For those of you who know anything about public speaking, or for those of you who are fearful of public speaking, be tasked with having to give a 5-minute speech and see how long 5 minutes seems to you. If you now have to give a talk or a speech for 5 minutes, because I teach public speaking. Okay. I am a public speaker. I do not have a problem with having to get up in front of folks and talk. That does not faze me. For public speaking, many people will tell you they would literally rather die than to get up in front of a crowd of people and have to speak. The research shows that. Polls will show that people would rather die. And now for me, I've always found that as fascinating, because I can get in the middle of Yankee Stadium with it packed to capacity and give a speech or a talk or what have you, and that would not faze me. But for the average person, for most people, rather than get up and talk in front of people, they would rather die. So I tell you what, for those folks who would rather die than to get up and talk in front of people, give them a 5-minute speech and let them see just how long that 5 minutes seem. So right now, I haven't even gotten to 9 minutes yet. I've given you 3 to 4 minutes in the microwave. I've given you 5 minutes as a speech. So I haven't even gotten to 9 minutes yet of someone underneath you who is begging and screaming and telling you, I can't breathe. Who is calling out to their mother. Who is saying, get off of I cannot breathe. And yet you look at that photograph and you see him cockily posing almost. You would almost think this man was like posing for a Hollywood movie. If you look at that video, if you look at those photographs. So for those that don't think 9 minutes is a long time, try holding your breath for 9 minutes. Try holding your head underwater for 9 minutes. Try doing anything for 9 minutes and you'll see it's longer than you think whenever it's something such as air that is a necessity. Or if you're just waiting. They say, like a watch pot never boils or a watched kettle never boils. You know why they say that? Because while you're sitting there waiting it seems like an eternity. It seems like it's forever. The truth of the matter is, it is a long time to a degree. But whenever you're trying to fight with air, so then they twisted it and tried to say, what I really heard was absurd was, he would have died that day anyway. Oh, really? Based on what? He hadn't died all these other days. So why on that particular day would he have died anyway? Had that not happened, he'd have died on that day any day. Anyway. So they became God now. They knew when somebody was going to die. Wow. That's the kind of dumbness that's coming up. And I have not watched the trial. I'm sitting here sharing this with you and I haven't watched it. However, I have followed it in terms of social media commentary, local news snippets. It gives me an idea of what's going on. And let me tell you where this is a little bit different from now, while I do believe O.J. Simpson killed those people, there is no video per se of O.J. committing the act. He may not have done it. I just honestly believe in my spirit that he did. But he may not have. And we don't have a video of him literally killing those folks, Ron and Nicole. We do not have a video of that. But we have a video of this man on this other man's neck. And like I said, take black and white out of it. Take the fact that the officer was white and the victim was black. Take that out of it for a minute, because that may have had something to do with it too. But take that out of it for a minute and go a little bit higher in terms of one man killing another man. That's, at the end of the day, the bottom line. That most likely George Floyd would have still been alive today had he not been underneath Derek Chauvin's knee. Most likely. And the fact that you have the video, all 9 or 10 or however many minutes of it, because that's the other thing. You're so high and mighty and arrogant that you did not care that the folks in the community had their, because one of the EMTs said when they came up, they were trying to get the community out. And he said, because folks had their phones out all over the place videoing. That's what the young man who was the EMT said. When he came up, folks were videoing, had their phones out videoing. He even was like trying to ask them, please. So you knew if that EMT knew when they pulled up, then the officers had to know. And the officers also knew that they were wearing body cams. They had body cams on as well. The officers knew that as well. And with all of that, you still were brazen enough to keep your knee on that man's neck until the life went out of him. Folks don't do animals that way. You don't do a dog like that. And I know they don't, because folks love their dogs and cats and whatever their other pets they have. Historically, now you want to talk white, black? Historically, black folks, historically in slavery and everything else, was treated worse than animals. Dogs were treated better. And in some instances, dogs today are still treated better. Have you ever looked at the pet ads? Have you ever looked at an advertisement for the pets? For the foods and everything else? In many instances, the dogs and cats are treated better than human beings. So the way George Floyd passed away or was killed, dogs don't die like that. Cats don't die like that. I had a situation in one of the schools I was leading where some kids on the way home from school, there was an ailing cat. Cat was already halfway in. There was 2 feet in the grave. The other 2 was still out. Kids being kids, they threw rocks at the cat and ultimately the cat passed. You will not believe the furor that caused. Now, this kid was like 9 or 10 at the time, if that. There were some folks out there, if they could have put this kid in jail for life, they would have. They were calling for my job as the principal of an event, mind you, that I had no knowledge of because the kids were on their way home from school. They had left the school building and was on their way home and playing as kids play. But they wanted my job. They were calling the superintendent to fire me for what a 4th or 5th grader did to a cat on his way home from school. We were getting calls from Italy because I was working with our public relations director at the time. We were getting calls from Italy, Arizona, all over the country because it made the news. This made the news. So now, for the folks who love cats, it was that serious for them. And yet now we're in a situation with a man who has put his knee on another man's neck for 9 minutes. George Floyd died worse than that cat I just described to you did. And the reaction was, I am not exaggerating. I am not making this up. We have calls on record from Italy about this kid killing this cat. Now, don't get me wrong. There is no way in the world I think the kid didn't deserve some punishment and consequences. Not even punishment. I hate punishment, but consequences, because he needed to understand in terms of life. There should have been a lesson there for this kid in terms of you don't take another life, whether it's an animal or a human being. And yet, we're sitting here watching 9+ minutes of video of a human being on another human being. From the faces that I've seen, the man's still sitting up in this. That's why I think he's off somewhere, because he's still sitting up in that courtroom looking as if he hasn't done anything. Looking as if like, why am I here? Probably thinking you all ain't gonna do nothing to me. That's probably what's going through his mind. Well, we're going to sit here, we're going to go through all this, but ain't not going to happen to me. Now, again, I'm going to give my personal thinking here. For me, he ought to get at least 10 years for every one of them minutes. For every last one of the minutes that he kept his knee on that man's neck, he ought to get at least 10 years for. So you multiply 10 times 9, that's 90. Ought to get at minimum 10 years for every minute that he was on that man's neck. No parole. No chance of parole. I'll tell anybody, I'm not big on the death penalty. That's not my thing. But I have no problem with him serving the rest of his years behind some bars. No problem with that whatsoever. maybe 15 years for every one of the minutes, just to be sure. But when does it get to the point, which leads me to another topic, in these mass shootings? Because I told you this past week was Holy Week, but in the last week and a half, 2 weeks or so, we've had 3 or 4 mass shootings. I know Atlanta was one, California was one, and there's been at least 2 more. When do we get to the point with these mass shootings? When is enough of those enough? Now, not for nothing. One could make the argument that our television shows and everything has always been violent. Let me share why I'm saying that. I remember as a child, my parents watching Gunsmoke. And last night, as things would have it, I watched about 3 or 4 episodes of Gunsmoke last night. And I'm sitting there watching this, and I told my wife, I said, wow, television really has always been violent if you think about it. That's not just a new thing. If you look at these shows, because Gunsmoke, boy, they didn't play on there, boy. If you ever watched that show, if you ever watched Gunsmoke, there was no talking. Like in many of the shows that you watch, folks tell you, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to shoot you, I'm going to this, I'm going to that. In Gunsmoke, And if they did say that, they meant it. If they told you, I'm coming back for you, they meant that. That one of them episodes I saw last night, they got into a saloon fight or a barroom brawl. And the man told him, that's all right. You got me here, but I'm coming back for you. And he did, too. Went to that man's house with a gun. Blew him away right there on his property. So in Gunsmoke, they did not play in terms of if they told you that. Matter of fact, one of the episodes I saw, the grandmother killed her own grandson because he had now killed a couple of people. And she asked him, did you do it? And he wouldn't tell her the truth. And she kept on saying, well, you got to come with me to the marshal. And he wouldn't go because, in Gunsmoke, the marshal is Matt Dillon. And so the grandson wouldn't go with her. You had the camera on Matt Dillon, who was in the house. And the sound you heard was that rifle shot. Grandma had done shot grandson. And not only shot him, killed him. Because my wife was sitting there and said, oh, Grandma will probably shoot him in the foot to scare him. Grandma killed him, shot him dead. Like I said, Gunsmoke, if you watch that show, and this is the other thing in terms of going back reflectively, watching shows that I used to watch as a kid and now watching them as an adult, you get a totally different perspective. I had that experience with the Flintstones and other cartoons I've been watching that when I watched whenever I was a kid. I've had that experience there, and I had that experience last night with Gunsmoke. When you start looking at these shows as an adult, you see just how much violence and adult messaging is in shows that we watched as kids. Now, as kids, it went straight over our heads or didn't get picked up on. But as an adult, as we watch these shows, you see just how much violence, even in a cartoon like Roadrunner, Bugs Bunny, you'll see just how much violence is in it. You'll see just how much adult messaging is in there. Whenever you're an adult, you can see it. As a child, you won't see it. But as an adult, you'll see it. So going back to what I was saying with Gunsmoke, there's a reason that show was called Gunsmoke. Everybody, and there are some folks today, and I was saying this to my wife last night too as we were watching. I said, you know what? These states that got these free to carry type laws, that's what they want. They want that same type atmosphere that was in Gunsmoke. You step on my toe, hey, I just shoot you. I don't like the way you look, hey, I just shoot you. I mean, straight up. I mean, for those of you, if you have cable, whatever, Gunsmoke happens to come on, don't believe me, just sit down and watch an episode of what I'm talking about and you'll see what I'm saying. There are some folks in this country that if they had their way, we'd be just like Gunsmoke. We'd be just like Matt Dillon and Miss Kitty. And that's the other thing. I didn't realize Burt Reynolds was in Gunsmoke. So you call me slow or whatever, but I'm sitting there watching, I'm like, oh my God, that's Burt Reynolds. It was a young, very young, almost like barely teenage Burt Reynolds in Gunsmoke. And there were other actors and actresses that appeared in those shows. I told you a couple weeks ago, Barbara Eden was on the Andy Griffith Show. I didn't know it was her till the credits roll. So a lot of actors and actresses got their starts in shows that were in the 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever, that you saw in movies later. Like they started in shows like Gunsmoke or whatever. The Andy Griffith Show, you start seeing folks later, like TV was in black and white and then it went to color. But you see folks who started their careers whenever shows were in black and white, then you see them up on the movie screen or so forth and so on. But the bottom line is TV, for the most part, has always been violent. And now we're to this point where folks are just losing their minds, and they're not taking just themselves out. They're taking other people that don't have nothing to do with them out. They are taking people that have nothing to do with them. They're taking their lives. So when does it get to that point with these mass shootings? Because, all right, it's one thing to be like on Gunsmoke where you had your revolver or you had a rifle in the house or whatever. It's another thing to be having these assault weapons. I mean, I was in the military. I'm an Air Force veteran. I was in this, so I know the weaponry. All right. The weaponry that we have in the military for that kind of killing is not the kind of weaponry you need to have in your house. Now, I don't care what nobody says. There's not that much hunting in the world. There's not that much raccoon and deer and rabbit and whatever else you hunt, quail or whatever. It's just not that much hunting in the world that you start having assault rifles. So even that argument is silly. Why is there a need for an assault rifle for the average citizen? Think about that. Why does an average citizen? So with that argument about hunting, that doesn't make a lot of sense either. And then I heard, I can't even paraphrase the silly comments Lindsey Graham made about his rifle, because I think he said he has an assault rifle. I can't even paraphrase those. But in any event, why does anyone, the average citizen, need an assault rifle? Just listen see, I'm big on words. You know that. I hang on words. Listen to that. Assault rifle. AR. Assault rifle. Assault means you're going to attack someone. You're going to assault someone, which kind of segues into my next thing in terms of, and this is part of it too. This Asian hate thing. See, again, there's a lot of hate going on. A lot of hate. I'm kind of flowing this morning. A lot of hate. You're just going to walk up to somebody and sucker punch them or kick them or push them over because they're Asian. Again, doesn't make sense. Now, this is my thing, because there is not one black person or African American that needs to be participating. There's not one black person need to walk up to an Asian person. Not one. Because we know what that feels like. Black people knows what that feels like to be assaulted. Speaking of the word assault, because of the color of their skin. So I don't understand why anybody black would participate in now assaulting another nationality. But yet I've seen, again, on news clips, at least it looks like from the video, I can't tell, but it looks like black people are in on this nonsense too, this Asian hate thing. Because the one in New York, the man had just gotten out of jail a year or so ago, a couple of years, for killing he's this is the craziness of this. The man that pushed the woman in New York, the woman was like 65, 70 years old, somewhere in there, Asian woman. That particular man looked like he was black, but I can't tell. But in any event, he had been in jail for like 17, 18 years for killing his mother. Now, my question whenever that came out was, well, why is he out? This is someone that killed his mother. Why is he out of jail? See, listen, I mean, there are some weird and just questions they used to have that song or saying things that make you go, We have a lot of things that make us go, what on earth? This is a man that killed his mother, served 17 to 18 years, whatever it was, and was out, and now assaults a 65-year-old woman because she's Asian. Clearly something is wrong with him. Now, at this point, they need to put him somewhere and throw away the key. Okay? Again, I'm not for the death penalty. I'm not that I don't, because to me, the death penalty kind of does this very same thing that you don't want somebody else to do. I don't think anyone has the right to take anyone else's life, whether it's the government, the law, or anybody else. So I'm not a death penalty fan, but I really don't have a problem with somebody being dropped on an island and they can never, ever get off again, or being placed behind bars that they can never get out of. I really don't have a problem with that. I don't. I don't think we ought to be taking anybody's life, but at the same time, whenever they've taken somebody's life, you cannot be in the general population. We got to remove you from the general population, because you're most likely, you're not going to hurt yourself. You're going to take somebody else out that had nothing to do with you. That Asian woman that was walking down the street had nothing to do with that man. Nothing. He didn't know her. She didn't know him. And yet he felt, because she was Asian, the need to kick her in the stomach or knock her over. Now, imagine now, 65, 70 years old, you just walking down the street, and some guy walking down the street turns around and just kicks you in the stomach or punches you in the face or slices you, whatever. Because there was another case. There was some Jewish folks who were walking, and this guy, you could see it again on the video. It's the man, the wife, the baby. They're walking. The guy walks past them, turns around, and starts slicing them. Each one of the baby, the mother, and the father, all three of them got cut. And they weren't even from the United States. They were visiting here. They were visiting here from another country, taking a walk. I don't know if it was Central Park or where it was, somewhere in New York. And the guy turns around, cuts off three of them. Like, this is some serious madness going on here, folks. It really is. This is some serious madness going, and all of this is still going on in the midst of this pandemic. Because we may be tired of COVID, but COVID is not necessarily tired of us. Yes, we're tired of wearing masks. We're tired of not being able to go to the clubs and the bars and the ball games and all that kind of good stuff. But we may be tired of COVID, but COVID is not tired of us. We have numbers that are still spiking, even though folks are getting vaccinated. The vaccination numbers are climbing higher every day, but so are the COVID cases. That is interesting to me, that you would have the vaccination numbers increasing exponentially, and at the same time, the COVID cases are going back up. The hospitalizations are going back up. So let's not get too comfortable too quick. Let's not get too happy, because again, on social media, I'm seeing all these folks, oh, they so giddy about this vaccination. Oh, I'm scheduled for my shot and I'm happier than I've ever been. I mean, I'm seeing all kinds. Folks are just straight up giddy about this vaccination. Let's not get too giddy. Let's not get too comfortable, because that vaccination is not a guarantee. I'm not downplaying the vaccination. I'm going to get vaccinated myself. But let's not get crazy and drop our masks. My mind went somewhere else for a minute there. Drop our masks and, just be all up in each other's face. And let's not get crazy. I mean, I'm watching the news about we had opening day for baseball. And they had a limited crowd percentage based on what the stadium could hold. But what caught my attention was the fact that the restaurant owners around the ballparks were expecting these humongous crowds. And I didn't understand why. I mean, they honestly thought that their restaurants were going to be packed out because it was opening day at Yankee Stadium. And so they were really frustrated and disappointed when those crowds did not show up. That you did not get, they didn't pack out the bars and the clubs and the restaurants around Yankee Stadium. And understandably so. From an economic standpoint, this has been a disaster. But I don't know why they would be expecting folks to all of a sudden flood into the bar because the Yankees are playing, that they were going to have this capacity crowds in the bars. I didn't quite understand that either, but they were really frustrated, and understandably so. But my point is, we don't need to be crowded up on each other yet. I personally am not getting on anyone's airplane yet. I'm not getting in anybody's bus yet. Heck, I don't even want to get in anybody's Uber. I get in my own car or walk or ride the bicycle. Because first off, wherever I'm going is very limited. I'm going only to very limited places, this studio being one of them. Very limited places. Things needed for life. Go to the supermarket to get food. For me, come here because we have to sanitize everything when we come in. When we shift, change over, everything had to be wiped down, sprayed down, so forth. We have to do all the sanitation here behind the microphone. Very few and limited places that I'm willing to go even now, and we're over a year into this. But folks just think they free. Oh, it's spring break. Oh, the weather's nice. Oh, so they're going to be up in folks' faces all over the place. So it's going to be real interesting after this week goes by. When spring, folks have different weeks for spring break. But after spring break time is over, it's going to be real interesting to see whether or not we start seeing spikes even further. This is not the time to get free, folks. This is not the time to just lose your mind and think everything is reverted back prior to the pandemic, because it hasn't. COVID is still out there. It's mutating. It's changing its form. COVID is stubborn. It's not going out easy. It's not it's not going out willingly. Even with the vaccination. So just, we're going to have to endure until this thing is over. I'm as tired of wearing a mask as the next person, but you know what? I'm going to wear it. I'm as tired as not seeing folks as the next person, but you know what? We'll keep that distance. We have to do what we have to do. Speaking of old TV and COVID, I'm going to take it back again. Yesterday, I had the opportunity. I was watching an old episode of The Waltons. Yeah, you remember John Boy and Jason and Mary Ellen and Aaron and Grandpa Walton and Mom Walton and Olivia and John. Well, in this particular episode, the mother, Olivia, caught polio. And the episode clearly showed that they were at that point in polio where we are with COVID right now. The doctors and the scientists, they didn't know how to treat polio yet. They were still trying to figure that out. And Olivia, the mother, had contracted polio to the point wherein her lower body was paralyzed from polio. And that was the upshot of the episode. And you could hear them grappling with polio the same way that we're grappling with COVID right now. And it was interesting to watch that as people were getting sick with polio on the episode, the thought processes and the patterns. And as it turns out, Olivia just was determined that she was just going to let polio beat her. And so by the end of the episode, of course, she's back up and standing. She wasn't totally walking yet, but that was a vast improvement over the episode from when it started, when she contracted it and thought it was the flu, to it being polio. And the doctor coming and everybody coming in terms of, what they thought. They honestly thought Olivia was going to be paralyzed the rest of her days because that's what polio was doing to folks. And the vaccine had not been invented yet. See, there's a lot you can learn. I mean, whenever you look back on some of these old shows, as I was saying earlier, from an adult perspective versus when we were children. Well, thank you for listening to another episode of The Mark Medley Show. You can always visit my website at markamedley.com. That's MarcaMedley. That is the portal. That is the hub. That is the entrance to all of the other endeavors that I undertake. So again, if you want to connect with me, if you want to find out my social media sites or anything else, just go to the website. But again, thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Mark Medley Show.